Okay, so the quiz, we're going to do a little bit of material before I do the review, but the quiz is comprehensive, so everything that we've gone over is testable. With that being said, there are no tricks. I'm not trying to trick you. That's not my goal. My goal is for you to have retention of information. So we've been talking about, systems modeling. That's really what we've been talking about up to this point. Why have we been doing systems modeling? Well, we want to be able to communicate some fairly complex ideas, right, to people who may or may not be technical. And so this is a universal language, right? So we have 3 terms that we're going to introduce. These are testable. Right? If I said something twice, you know that you're probably going to see it again. These are testable. All right. So cognitive loading, we have cognitive loading. We have intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. All right. And these refer to basically effort or work that's put into how information is learned and processed and all that. So intrinsic is the effort that is associated with learning new material, how you process that material. And we all learn differently. How many people in here are hands-on learners? You got to have something in your hand to really get it, right? How many people are more theoretical? You like to read a book on it, and yeah, you got it. Okay, we got a couple, all right. How many people are somewhere in between? Most of us are, all right. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit, all right. So extraneous is how that information is presented to the learner, okay? And so, makes sense. We've got information associated with learning new material, information that, or how the material is presented to the learner, and then germane is how we create a permanent storage for that, all right? And so, we all learn differently. And how many people have developed little things that you can do to help you establish things in your memory? How many people have little things that you do? Anybody care to share what they do? Duncan?
Well, just for this, I always think of extraneous as being kind of extra, a lot going on outside, so it's something they're teaching to you. Intrinsic, you're
Okay.
Intrinsically motivated. It's
Okay.
From within. And then germane's kind of got me stumped because the only thing I know is debate must be germane, so it's really balanced.
Sometimes you just have to memorize something, right? Unfortunately. So we're going to talk about exactly what he did right there. What did he do? He linked something new with something he's already familiar with, right? And then we talked about this a little bit before. And I just spit in my mouth. Yeah. Matt, you want to share with us? What's something that you do?
I a lot of times will associate things with different colors, just random objects that it reminds me of. I don't know why.
Okay.
I do a lot of music.
All right, so you're a visual
Yeah.
learner then, okay? Anybody else have anything that they want to share? Something that you do to help you put information into this germane category? All right. So these will be testable. I've said it 3 times now. All right. So we're going to talk about 2 different acronyms. All right. Where do these acronyms come from? I've been a Red Cross instructor trainer now for, I think, 30 years. If it's not 39, if it's not 30, it's 29. And so they have, and these come directly out of their instructor trainer course. All right. And I think that these are probably the best work the Red Cross has ever done as far as learning. And these 2 acronyms that we're going to talk about help us to shape what we're doing so that we can get the message across to learners of different aptitudes, abilities, whatever. All right. So the first one is MARS, M-A-R-S. all right? And these are factors that affect learning, all right? Why do I care? Well, because these factors are affecting what's going on in the room, all right? So, who's heard of the captive terrorist before? You guys haven't heard about the captive terrorist in your speech class back in high school? All right. So, as a Red Cross instructor and as a professor here, occasionally we have somebody who's in a class that's there because they have to be, not because they want to be. All right? Can you identify with that? Have you had to take a class that you're like, man, I hate this, I do not want to go, it has nothing to do with me? Huh? Yes? We can all identify with that? All right? So, what happens, and I've had this happen more in Red Cross-oriented class than anything, in that a large employer will say, you are going to go and you're going to get first aid and CPR trained this weekend. All right? They just got voluntold. Yep, you're volunteer, you're going. All right? And so they show up, and typically they sit in the back, and I got this going on, right? How receptive are they to receive information? They are not, okay? So are there things that I can do to influence that? There are, okay? And we're going to talk about some of those things. So first is motivation. Why are they there? Okay? For all of you, most of you are taking this particular class because what? You want to get a Bachelor of Science instead of a Bachelor of Arts. True story? All right. So this is kind of one of those classes that, yeah, I don't really know anything about it, but I got to have it if I want to get the Bachelor of Science instead of the Bachelor of Arts. And then you show up and you're like, oh, who's this crazy guy? Right? Okay. So motivation, why a person is there. So all of you can see that, hey, there's some benefit from taking this class and completing this class. And so every day, everybody's here, right? Which is, to me, that's a huge compliment when everybody shows up to your class every day, you're doing something right. Yeah. Might just be that you're really strict and you get grades for that, but whatever, okay? But why are they there? So let's go back to that terrorist, that captive terrorist in the back of the room, all right? Has anybody ever witnessed something like that? Yes? Anybody care to share? Okay. Does their attitude bleed over to other people? Does it affect other people's learning? It certainly does. All right. So by just recognizing that people are there for different reasons, some of them have been voluntold, some of them are there just because they have to be. Maybe they weren't voluntold, but they know they have to do it and they're there. All right. If I can understand that, there are things that I can do to draw them in. All right? And for me, this is the biggest single challenge as an instructor, is to be able to grab that person and to suck them in, to get them involved in what we're doing. All right? And so when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to get them to be involved in what we're doing, I have subdued the captive terrorist. And typically what I find is that that captive terrorist then becomes the energy for the rest of the class. All right? So I need to be able to recognize why people are here, and then I need to be able to take steps to address people who are not here for the best reasons. All right? So how do I do that? How do I get that captive terrorist subdued? Y'all have seen me do it. What do I do? How do I motivate them? Okay, I call on them. What else? Okay. Sometimes you call them out. All right. How many times have I asked people in this classroom to pull something from their own experience? Every day. Every single day. Why do I do that?
It's more relatable, more likely to.
Yes. It is more relatable to them. All right. And a lot of times what I find is that people are there in that classroom, right? And they're thinking, I have no experience that I can bring to bear on this. I don't have anything that's relatable to this. All right? Well, if I can get them to establish a thought linkage with something they already know, which we were doing over here earlier, right? Duncan was doing that. All right? If I can get them to do that, all of a sudden, their energy starts getting directed towards, well, hey, yeah, that does work. All right? And then once I get that flow started, sometimes it's hard to shut off. All right? But it's a challenge. All right? So motivation, understanding why they're there, and not everybody is there for the same reason. And so we may have to we may have to change the way that we teach. Association. We've already talked about this one. I just talked about it there. All right? The ability to associate new material with something that you already know, all right, is huge. Our next acronym that we talk about is going to be BASIC, and I'm going to talk about ways that we can help our learners form those thought associations. All right? So how many people have, stumbled on something new, read a little bit about it, and they hit something that all of a sudden, oh, yeah. You get the little light bulb going on and said, yeah, I can link this back to something else. What happens when that does? Are there other associations with that? Yeah. All right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build thought association. We're trying to build mind linkages for our learner. All right. Some learners do it very well by themselves. Some don't. A lot of people don't really understand the whole process. But if I can link something that you already know to new material, then you've got it. And then I just keep adding links to that chain. And so when we hit anywhere on that chain, whoop, we can go up and down, and we've got that knowledge. Really, really huge. Repetition. The more times you say something, do something, the more you got it, right? So for important things, how many times do I repeat it? Every single day. Okay? So I'm going to share a story with you. So when I was teaching at Ball State, one of the classes that I taught was First Aid and CPR, the professional rescuer. All right, so this was a full semester class, 3 credit hours. And so a lot of lectures, and then we had a fair amount of hands-on. And so every day when we were actually doing hands-on CPR training, all right, I never took shortcuts. All right, what does that mean? It means that every single time that we started CPR, we start from, I arrive on the scene, I survey the scene for my own safety, the number of victims and the mechanism of injury. How many people have been through a CPR class before? You remember that? Every single time. I didn't just start at, we're going to start with compressions. Every single time we started, you arrive on the scene. Okay? You get where I'm going with this. So that's how I teach. All right? I can't think of anybody who actually showed up to class on a regular basis that didn't have mastery of the CPR skills. And I did this for over a decade. I can't think of anybody. All right? Because we did it enough times, they didn't have to think about it. So, let me flash forward. So, I don't know, it's been a while. It's probably been 7 or 8 years now. There was a van load of Amish folk on the interstate that overturned, and a bunch of them were killed. All right, this is probably long before any of you got here. All right, so there were like 14 or 15, a lot of small children and stuff in there. And one of my students was the first one on the scene. Okay? And so he arrived on the scene, and he wound up rendering aid to 4 or 5 people before the actual first responders got there. All right? Well, this is all going on. I know nothing about this. I heard about the van that overturned, but I had no idea that one of my students was there. The next day in class, he was there early. And he says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I'm like, "Sure." He says, "Did you hear about the van that overturned?" with all the Amish people in it? I said, yeah. He says, well, first off, I owe you an apology. I'm like, okay, where are you going with this? All right. He says, I really hated it. I thought it was the stupidest thing ever because you were making us do this from the start every single time. He says, but yesterday when I arrived on the scene, I just acted. I didn't have to think, I just did. He says, so I owe you an apology. And he says, I don't know what else to say. Okay? So repetition, making somebody do something time after time after time, especially something that's important, is very huge. Senses. There's a lot of research out on this. The more senses that you involve, the better the memory retention. How much do we remember of what somebody says? 5%, 10%, that's pretty small. All right. If they say it and they see it on the screen, it goes up marginally. If we're actually doing something with it, all right, we get about to the halfway point. All right. So the more active we can have our learners involved in what we do, all right, the more they're going to retain. So this Mars thing, these are all things that affect learning. How does that affect me? Because I'm creating these models, right? Well, I can take all of this and I can put that into my models, all right, and how I present the information so that I can get maximal effect for what I do. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody tracking? All right. All right, so the next acronym we're going to talk about, and the Red Cross referred to these as instructor functions. All right. What do we do as the person who is presenting information? How can we make that presentation more effective? So the first one is bridging. And I've already kind of talked about this. And I do it every day. Whenever I talk about something, I do what? I'll talk about the new topic. I'll link it back to something that we've already learned. Right? And then before we go, I talk about what we're going to do the next day, right? So we talked about that association thing under the MARS acronym. I'm helping you build those thought processes, those thought linkages. That's what I'm doing. All right. And it sounds kind of, it's like, that's a whole lot of effort. Okay, but it's not. If you just make yourself do it, all right, before long it becomes just second nature. I don't even think about it anymore. It's just how I teach. Okay, so I always want to try to link new information to something we've already learned, or better yet, something that you already know, something from your own experiences. All right, and then again, I'm going to take that material that we covered today, and I'm going to link it forward to something else. I'm going to talk about that. All right, so I'm bridging back and I'm bridging forward. Assigning. For me, this is actually the hardest part. I don't like assigning work. All right, because I know I hated homework. I still do. All right, you would think that, you know, a professor here at the university doesn't have homework, but we do. All right, because we've got faculty meetings, we've got staff meetings, we got department meetings, and there's always stuff that needs to be done. All right, that's part of it. As part of a lesson plan, as part of a learning process, we're going to have things that people need to do. All right, and we want to develop those so that we're doing what? We're taking advantage of that MARS acronym, that motivation, association, repetition, and senses, so that they're getting the most out of it, so that they're going to retain the most of it. Summarizing. So the Army has this concept. I'm going to tell you what we're going to tell you. So we're bridging ahead. I'm going to tell you what's important out of that. And then when we're done, I'm going to do what? I'm going to tell you what was really important out of that. And so probably several times you've heard me say, if you remember nothing else, I want you to remember this slide. All right? And you'll hear me say that a lot. All right? Because literally, for an hour's worth of presentation, there's probably 5 key concepts that I want you to learn. and usually 3. All right? So I'll boil it down. Hey, here are the key elements that I want you to remember. All right, summarizing. The ability to summarize really helps your learners. All right, if you can tell them, hey, these are the key points and these are what they mean, all right, it's very huge for them. Intervening. I think this is my specialty. Because we've got the captive terrorists in the room, we've got people going to sleep, we've got people who just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend and their mind is somewhere else. All right? Our job as a presenter is to try to hook those people back in, to make them forget what they're worried about and let them focus on what we're doing. All right? There are a lot of things that you can do, all right? And I feel like this really is my strong point. All right? And then climate setting. And there are 2 types of climate. There's the physical climate, as in how bright are the lights, how warm, how cold. All right? And then there's the physiological side. Do people feel safe? Do they feel that they can share their opinions, that they can share their ideas? All right? So these are things that we can do to make somebody feel like it's a supportive climate. All right? So 2 acronyms. They both are testable. MARS, motivation, association, repetition, and senses. Basic, bridging, assigning, summarizing, intervening, and climate setting. All right, now we're going to review. Okay, so we started with the context diagram. You should be able to write a context diagram. If there's anybody who can't do that, who is unclear, all right, come see me. Better yet, go back to the lectures because we recorded every single one of them except for one. All right? Know what the context diagram is. Know what's not in it. All right? Again, it's not a trick question. I don't believe in trick questions. There's a slide that I've shown you multiple times, and I've said, if you remember nothing else, remember this slide. How many people have heard me say that? What's on that slide? It's got the different types of modeling, right? So we've got the context diagram, and we have the swim lane diagram, otherwise known as the cross-functional process map. We have the flow chart, and then we have the state diagram, right? I promise you, you will see that on your quiz. And it's not going to be just a blank thing for you to fill in, okay? All right? There'll be something missing from that diagram, all right? So you'll need to fill in this part that's missing. It's that easy. All right? Again, I'm not trying to trick you. I want you to retain this information. The state diagram, before we get to Deming. All right? Know what a state diagram is, and know what it tells you, and know what the symbology is for it. Okay? I'm not going to ask any tricky questions. If I have a picture of a state diagram, I would expect you to be able to tell me what it's telling me. Okay? W. Edwards Deming, actually W. Edwards, not Edwards. Who was he? Where was he? All right. So he talked about 14 key principles of transforming business effectiveness, right? And then he also talked about the 7 deadly sins. I'm going to tell you exactly what the question says. You need to be able to tell me what two of each of those are and what they mean in today's world. In your own words. Don't regurgitate what I said. Okay? This is all captured on lecture. Go back, watch those videos. All right? No surprises. Yes, sir.
Sorry, that was two of the key principles, not two of the deadly sins.
Two of each. Two
Okay,
key,
thanks.
two deadly. All right? And those are actually worth a fairly substantial amount of points. It is rote memorization, right? You're going to have to memorize two key concepts, and then, again, I want you to tell me in your own words what that means today. We talked about work. Value-added work, non-value-added work, and waste. Be able to tell me what the difference is. What is value-added work and who pays for it? What is non-value-added work and who pays for it? What is waste? I think this was, what, on the second or third lecture? On Moodle, there's a link to, I don't know, it's like a 6 or 7 minute, maybe it's 8-minute video that talks about synthesis and analysis. Watch that. All right, and be able to talk a little bit about the difference between synthesis and analysis. All right, I'm not expecting a dissertation on this. All right, 3 to 4 sentences should get it. All right, but yeah, that video link's out there. It's been there for a couple days. Questions? All right, there are no surprises. I'm not going to throw anything new on you. Everything is on the